What is up, everybody? Sysadmin Sean here, and today we are going to do our first monitoring and alerting system install guide, and we're going to be following the Nagios core installation procedure. We'll go through setting up, getting the server software installed, getting the first configs going, looking at the web GUI, and then probably setting up a contact, or at least showing what setting up a contact would look like. And that's how we'll start. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. So as you can see up here, we are at Nagios' website for Nagios Core, and this actually has a full install guide. Now you can do install from source or, quick start guides. We're going to do install from source, and we're going to follow the Red Hat CentOS Oracle because we're going to be using Rocky, which is pretty much the same thing. So we'll go through all of this using the 8-9 steps because we'll be doing 8-9. Following these instructions, going on through, do this. We're going to do everything on here. And I'll put this link down in the description below so you can use it to try out your own Nagios install. So let's get over to our terminal. Let me grab this down here so I can follow along. And pretty much we're just going to do copy paste. Should be no big deal here. I think the first thing I'm going to have to do is make sure I disable SE Linux because that's what everyone wants you to do. So we'll copy that line. We'll set enforce 0. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. So we might end up having to fix something else later. And then we have some prerequisites for doing, that's not what I wanted, for doing the compiling and things of that nature. And also the HTTP web server, PHP is involved here, which for some people that's not very cool, but it's what the system needs. Perl, we got Perl, GCC, glibc, glibc common, HTTPD, PHP, wget, GD, and GDDevil for development. So we've got those packages getting installed nice and quick. This is a small monitoring server because we won't actually be adding a whole bunch, but there is information in the install guide for Nagios about how big you need to make the server when you're adding X thousand amount of agents or endpoints or servers, monitors, all those kind of things. And then there's also, I'm pretty sure Nagios can do proxy servers. So you can send some checks to a different server and it can relay that information back to the main server. So you don't have to make them so big, or you can spread them out across multiple data centers, things like that. But it's been a while since I've done anything like that. All right, that part's done. We've got to install another piece of software, OpenSSL development. And then we'll run an update just in case. It should find nothing. Yep, nothing to do. So now we're going to download the source code. And we are following their guide exactly. So this is what they say to grab. And it's their documentation, so it should be trustworthy. We'll see what happens. Looks like I got something. And then we'll just open it up. So there's that. And then we'll go into the folder that it made, or it should have made. Yep, it made 1459. And we'll do configure. And as long as this succeeds, we'll do make all. You might remember this from the Linux Skill Up Challenge, where it was showing compiling software from code. There are some repos out there, I do believe, that will let you just DNF install Nagios. But we're going to follow the guide. So everything looked okay there. So we run make all. And of course, we're doing everything as root because I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes. You should really be using the sudo command or do it as root. This is going to be the only thing running on the server. And then obviously don't use the root user for anything afterwards. Unless you got to fix something. This will probably take a little bit, so we'll probably skip through it unless there's an error, and I'll show that error. But otherwise, we'll come back when this is all finished. All right, and that's done. The next step is there is a command for us to install groups and users related to Nagios. So make install groups users. So I did group add r Nagios, user add g Nagios Nagios, and then it wants us to do user mod -a capital G Nagios Apache for HTTPD. All right, and then that's done. Now we need to install the binaries. Make install. And again, we'll just skip through this to the end. There's no reason to watch it. Next is to install the service/daemon. So we run this make command. So it does these little things here, and then we run systemctl enable HTTPD service. And there we go. Now, the next thing it suggests we do is install command mode. This installs and configures external command file. I'm not sure what this is for. It's been a while since I've used this, so there's that done. Next on the list is going to be install configuration files. So there is a sample config, which we need for the software to run, and I'll show what those config files are. You know, it's Nagios config, CGI config, resources, templates, commands, contacts, time periods. I'll go over all of these. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go over it. And then we also have a web configuration for Nagios. There we go. And then we need to configure our firewall. So let's do that. Why do they show it twice? Very strange. We are running on port 80 because it's internal right now. And then we will create a Nagios admin user account. This will be used to access the, I'm guessing, admin page of the Nagios dashboard. And then we'll go ahead and start HTTPD. And then we'll go ahead and start Nagios. Now, in theory, we should see something. Let's 30.10. Let's see if it's up here. There we go. All right. Now I believe this is going to be Nagios admin and the password we set. Yep. So here we are. This is Nagios. This is it in all of its basic glory. As you can see, we have a down here for this host, which is our local host. So it's kind of curious that this is listed as down, but we'll have to take a look at that. So we'll go back to the install guide because I believe there's more steps. So let's take a look here. Yep. Nagios is running, but wait, currently you've only installed Nagios core engine. You'll notice some errors under the hosts and services along the lines of, that's exactly what we see. So we have to install Nagios plugins. So let's get back over there and do that. Nagios plugins are a bunch of Perl scripts and bash scripts and a whole bunch of different stuff is this 8 or 9? Okay, it's 9. So let's grab. So we got to check for this stuff again, and we're adding in some more to make sure we have everything for the plugins. Yeah. And then we enable CRB through Config Manager. And then we install PerlNet SNMP. So there's our prerequisites for the plugins. There we go. And then we will follow the same steps as compiling the code for Nagios core. All right. And if that's all successful, we should be able to navigate to this directory. User local Nagios libexec, and there we go. We have plugins. So all of these are commands that you can run. So like, let's do check SSH. If I just type that in, it'll give me information on how I can check SSH for a host. So let's see. Check SSH. We're going to do -4 for IPv4. I don't know R. We're going to do port 22, and we'll do 192.168.30.10. Will that work? Yeah, there we go. SSH OK, OpenSSH 8.7, protocol 2.0. And this is how long it took for that to check. So now, if we go back to our website and take a gander, we should begin to see these disappear. I don't know if all of these will go away, but we can kick off a schedule next check, force, commit, done. And let's see our tactical overview. Yeah, look, it's clearing up slowly but surely. It's going to mark this one. It's looking for check load, check users, check HTTP, check ping. There they go. And we have one warning. And I bet you that is interesting. It can't find the service, but that's okay. But now we can look and we can see that there's no host down. We have a host up. We have 7 OK services, 1 warning, active checks, passive checks, notifications. We are not getting notification like it's checking SSH, just like I showed you. And here are the good checks: SSH, swap, total processes, root partition. Basically, this is monitoring space, ping, current load, users, all that. And there you go. I mean, basically, we're now monitoring the Nagios server using Nagios. But we need to add stuff. We need to add the ability to... Oh, wow. I've never looked at it like this. I don't want to look at it like this. We need the ability to set up a contact, to maybe make some changes to what we're monitoring. Maybe we don't want all these services monitored. Like, I don't really care about the SSH version. That doesn't interest me that much. It might interest you, but for me, it's not that big a deal. And of course, this is how we can look at service groups and host groups, which we don't really have any set up. And then there's even a map function, but I have not configured it. So we'll stick with tactical overview. Beautiful. Let's go back to our terminal and let's look at those configuration files that I showed you just a minute ago, or that I pointed out. Let's see if we can remember where those are at. cd etc Nagios user local Nagios. Okay. And then we go into, it's not bin, it's etc in here. So there's our Nagios config, our CGI config, and our resources. Let's check out that Nagios config. This is your brain, essentially, for Nagios. So this tells it what config files to be looking for, or if you have a folder of config files, like here, config directory, servers, printers, switches, routers, so that you can compartmentalize your systems a little bit more. That's what this is for. And as you can see, all we have turned on right now is the local host config, the commands config, the contacts config, the time periods, and templates. And then if we go down a little bit more, this will talk about the cache and resources, status.dat. This is how it checks. This is how you tell it what user to be using and what group to be using. Remember when we made the Nagios user and the Nagios group. The command file. So this is what lets Nagios run its commands. Lock file, temp path, event broker. Warning, warning, warning. I don't touch any of this. Let it archive, let it log, syslog, let it rotate. Nagios will keep track of all the alerts over time. And if you install, there are some plugins to add graphs. And then you can install those graphs on your systems and it'll scoop up that archive data and it will let you see the trends. Now, a lot of other monitoring software has that graphing built in. Nagios comes pretty bare bones when you go with core, but again, this is free. So that's pretty handy. So again, this is all information about timeout values, auto rescheduling, data retention, scheduling information. There's a lot in here that I don't think I've ever touched. So let's get out. Let's look in objects. So in here are the default, the template config files that I gave us. So let's take a look at that localhost one. So this is a huge version of a Nagios config file for a single server. There's a lot of comments and notation. It's telling it use Linux server. So that's a template used to assign certain things, like host groups and all of that jazz. Here's the host name. Here's the alias it's going by, and it's using this. It's using the loopback, right? This is where it's setting the host group for it, and this is going to set the different services. So here's the ping check to make sure it's up. Here's the root partition check with its warning and critical values. So it's checking local disk and it's saying warn at 20% full, or warn with 20% space free, critical with 10% space free. Here's the one that to monitor users, warn if there's 20 users online, critical if there's 50. Here's local processes, warn at 250 procs, critical at 400. So, you know, in case the system is overloading. And these are numbers you're going to want to change. You can modify these. You can come in here and be like, warn me if it's at 150. That's totally fine. You can do that. Same with load. This is going to be load like if you were looking at top or anything like that. Here is our swap check. I don't really care about that. Here's that SSH check. So let's say we don't want to see that check anymore. Let's just go in here and comment it out. We want to keep the HTTP check. So we'll save that file and then we'll systemctl restart Nagios. So now it's restarted. Let's head back over to our system. And then let's refresh this. And you'll notice that it's gone to 6 OK checks because I've removed that SSH check. So if I don't want to monitor that anymore, now it's gone. But if that ever changes, I didn't delete that entry in the terminal in the config file. So if I ever need to bring it back up, I can just uncomment. And that's just how that works. Now they don't have certain things in here that you can do. Let me go back to the CD user Nagios libexec. Yep. There is one in here that I used a lot back in the day. Oh, I don't see it. Was that a custom one? There's a service, there's a plugin I used to use a lot back in the day called check service. So if I needed to monitor any random service, I could just do a check service and then give the service name and it would go. I don't see that on here, which is interesting to me. That must have been an additional plugin. Anyway, let's go back to our configuration area. CD, CD etc, CD objects. All right, let's take a look at contacts. This is where you set up users to get notified about things. So as you can see, here's a default contact for Nagios admin. So let's say we wanted to make a contact. Let's copy. Don't show this again. Okay. And there, we've made one by accident. It's not really where I wanted it. Clean that up. That line too. And we'll just put it down here. And we'll call this contact name Bob. And he's a generic contact. His alias will be Bob. And his email will be bob@bob.com. So that's his email. Cool. We can also set someone for Nagios admin. So now Bob is he is a contact. He's not a contact group though. So what we need to do is define a contact group for him to be in. He's not a Nagios administrator. He's going to be a Linux admin. So we'll define a contact group. We'll type this one out. We will do contact group _ name Linux admins. Alias Linux administrators. Members will be Bob. And then we'll close that. And if I type that in right, we won't get an error when we do this. Hey, I typed it in right. Now, we've added Bob as a contact, but we haven't added Bob to anything to get alerting on. So what we need to do is we need to go to, I think, templates. So in templates, there is a contact template. So this is a generic contact. We gave Bob Linux, I think. So you can see contact groups, admins. And what we can do here is we can say, nah, admins aren't going to get modified about this. Linux admins will, because it's for Linux servers. Okay. So now the admins of Nagios will not get alerted on localhost, but Bob will. And that's all you got to do. And then we could change this and set Bob, or you could even do this. You can do boop, 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 comma delimited groups. And that should work fine. I want to check my contact again real quick. Yeah, we are using generic contact. So if we go back in the templates, we can look that Bob is going to get notifications 24/7, host notifications 24/7 in service. Notification options. He's going to get warnings, unknowns, criticals, recovered, flapping and schedule downtime. Notify by email on services and notify by host on by email as well. And then host notification on down, up, recovery, flapping, scheduled. So if we schedule downtime, that will notify him of the scheduled downtime event, but then let him know that they won't be getting alerts, essentially. And then we have templates for all sorts of other stuff: printers, switches, services. So you can have generic services. You can build something out. So maybe you don't want 24/7. You could change this to hours and days of the week and things like that. All sorts of neat stuff there. So let's take a look at commands. Commands is one, how it's going to send an email notification, and then how it's going to run certain checks. So this is where you can define templates for checks so that you only have to put in this name instead of all of these flags. If you remember, when we were looking at the check, like check SSH, we have to put in all these flags, but if we build that check as a templated check inside the commands config, which there probably is one right here. Yeah. It's already expecting certain arguments and host address, and it's getting that information from our config file. So let's go back to localhost and we'll look at the SSH check again. So these are our arguments. And then this is our host name or host address. So if we can see here, check SSH, we didn't have to pass any arguments really. We just needed to pass that command and the host address. It just needs to know who it's checking, and it's checking localhost. So that's it there. I mean, that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot to getting Nagios set up and getting it ready for your environment. Obviously, you need to go through, and what I've showed you is a very manual process. You have to figure out what all your hosts are. You have to configure host files for each one. What you should do is obviously use that folder structure that's in Nagios config to then create a config file, depending on how many servers you have, a config file per server, so that you can make changes on each one without having to dig through. The first time I worked with Nagios, they hadn't done the folders. They had just made a single config file for all Windows servers, a single config file for all Linux servers, and a single config file for all network switches in the environment, which caused a lot of hiccups when you were trying to update and edit different devices and you had to search through the file and figure out where that entry was. So one of the first things we did when we were upgrading that system was to split out stuff. We split out things into, different buildings and different data center requirements. So we'd have like an ERP stack and so on and so forth. They have long since moved far, far away from that monitoring system into a new monitoring system. They're not using Nagios anymore. I don't use Nagios anymore. I have moved on. But if you're running a small environment and you just want some notifications for if something's up or down, this is a great quick way to get your hands, into a monitoring system and see what you think about it. What's really cool is the next system I'm going to show you, Ichinga, can actually take these config files that you build in Nagios and absorb them into itself and just use those configs so that you don't have to rewrite everything, which a lot of other ones may make you do. But that's it for this one, and we'll see you in the next one.